LSU's Pro Day. We're going to talk about Jayden Daniels. Keith's going to give his grade from the Pro Day. Malik Nabers. Is he Jamar Chase? We're going to talk about this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a national scout and a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. And guys, you know I got to kick this intro to my guy, Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ with those LSU Bengal Tigers. And DP, I'm going to just stop the intro right there because we are talking about LSU's Pro Day because I was there last week and I felt like this. Hey, I had to travel to the Big 12 Pro Day, but I wanted to take the time to communicate to our everydayers, right? First of all, shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. But just to give an honest viewpoint of what LSU's Pro Day was, right? You're talking about 3 of the potential top 20 NFL draft prospects, right? Depending on people's boards. So we have to get into the conversation. I've watched ESPN, right? I watched some of these other national media outlets, and I don't think that they went in depth enough, right, for the magnitude of what the Pro Day was and breaking this thing down. So I want to spend that time to break this thing down. But listen, I'm telling you, it's going to be a really good show. Listen, hit the like button if you haven't. Comment after each segment. I'm sorry, and then subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel. But DP, before we get this conversation started, man, why don't you hit them with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Keith, Jayden Daniels, right? The man of the hour, the projected highest pick for the LSU Tigers in the 2024 NFL Draft. From your point of view, being there, boots on the ground, seeing this Pro Day in person, how do you grade on a scale A to D, right? How do you grade the Pro Day for Jayden Daniels? We know he didn't run, so we wouldn't be able to see that rumored 4.33 that they talked about. So, you know what I mean? But from throwing and everything else, body language, all that type of stuff, leadership that you could see, how would you grade him?
Well, DP, I'll say this first of all. With your grading scale from A to D, I would have liked if you'd have been my teacher, right? Just knowing that I couldn't get right. That elevates that right there. I appreciate
I ain't putting the F on the scale for Jayden, but can't do it, brother.
I wish you was my teacher and people gave me they gave me that leeway to say Keith can't even get an F. I'd have been a whole lot better, DP. That GPA would have looked differently. But nah, man, let's jump into it. Giving him a grade, I would probably give him a B to a B. I thought it was a B. And what I think was not communicated was this thing started off slow, man. It started off slow. I'm sitting there, I'm watching on the sideline, right? And you would think because, you know, the combination of, well, Brian Thomas did stuff at the combine, but especially Jayden Daniels, we haven't seen any of them, right? And it was about throwing at the Pro Day. And honestly, the beginning of the Pro Day was out of sync, honestly. And there were a couple errant passes, right? And you can point. I feel like with those situations, you can point the fingers both ways, right? Like, was the wide receiver in the right situation? Did the quarterback just flat out miss, right? If you had to ask me my opinion, I thought a couple of them, the quarterback just flat out missed, right? And he started to, I don't know if it was nerves necessarily, right? Or just some rust, haven't not did it. But I would think that you're throwing all the time, you know, in preparation for this Pro Day, especially with your guys. So it started off slow. If I had to grade the arm strength, I think because obviously, you know, the people have listened to this all the time know that my biggest question with Jayden Daniels was his middle of the field throws, right? I think Jayden Daniels has good enough arm strength to throw the ball in the middle of the field, but I don't foresee him being one of those tight window, you know, when we watching TV right on CBS and Fox, they're showing those where it's 2 inches apart, right, and they're really just driving that thing in the middle of the field. I think he has good arm strength, from what I've seen, and he can, if you're doing those play action type situations, he's a guy that can, if there's a vacant spot, he can get into the middle of the field, throwing outside of the hashes, right? With you're talking about your comebacks, your curls. I think you can apply the same type of logic where the arm strength is good enough. It's obviously it's not going to be the Justin Herberts, the Josh Allens, but I think it's good enough. And then the deep ball accuracy, that was another thing that it took a couple times to get it connected, right? But once they got it connected, it was some beautiful throws. So I was sitting up there, man. I questioned a lot of things. I was like, okay, is this on the QB coach? Is this on the script, right, that they have going? Or they not warmed up? Is it jitters? But I will say this, that it finished off well. You see, he was hitting Brian Thomas in stride. He was hitting Kyron Lacy in stride. He was hitting Malik Nabers, and they kind of, I think they pretty much worked it to where it was short throws to intermediates, worked the basics. And then the last 10 throws was nothing but just basically deep bombs, just showing off his arm strength and his deep ball accuracy.
Yeah, Keith, I remember talking to somebody on Twitter, or X as we call it, about the arm strength of Jayden Daniels. Would you, to me, when I look at it, it resembles a little bit of CJ Stroud's. Now, I think CJ Stroud may have a little bit more oomph behind his throws when he, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think people remember that was one of the narratives about Stroud. People didn't think he had like a legitimate arm. They didn't think he had a really good arm. It was like, oh, well, he's really accurate. He's got good ball placement, but arm strength was never discussion. And then his rookie year comes along, and we see him make throws into tight windows, throws deep down the field, different things, like really pushing the ball. So how do you believe that CJ Stroud has a stronger arm than Jayden, or you think they're somewhat comparable?
I think CJ's, if you can compare them, but I do think CJ's arm is stronger. And watching it at the pro day, that's my first time watching Jayden live, right? I mean, being right next to him, right outside of the LSU Bama game a couple years ago. But just watching him live and just watching him rip it. I think CJ Stroud arm is stronger right now. How many percentage points and things like that? You can get into the velocity and miles per hour, all those type of things. But I think CJ Stroud's arm is stronger. When I look at it though, the deep ball accuracy, I think that's the fun part with Jayden. And I think my biggest takeaway from the pro day for Jayden is the people that like him, you probably still like him. The people that have question marks, you probably still have question marks about him just because of how the pro day started and how it finished. So I'll be honest with you, DP. At the very beginning, I was thinking, I was sitting in the stands, and I told you it started off rocky. And I'm like, here go to JJ McCarthy, right? I'm like, this coming, because it did not start off well, to be completely honest with you, DP. And I've done 6 pro days at LSU specifically. It didn't start off well, but it finished very strong. So I think the people that have concerns, they're going to point to the beginning half. The people that are all in on Jayden Daniels, they're going to find solace with it with the back half of the pro day.
Yeah, I think, when I watched it, of course, on NFL Plus, and like you said, it started slow, but he eventually picked up rhythm.
Did you seen similar things? Like, how did you?
Yeah, no, 100%. No, yeah. The slow starts, and it felt like it was somewhat of a theme with these quarterbacks, because Drake May was out there air mailing early passes. Caleb was having some really high throws early, and it felt like you said, I think it was jitters, right? Like, just guys knowing that this isn't just a normal throwing session. It's like, man, this is money. You know what I mean? Like, this is, for Caleb, it's like, all right, I know where I'm going. You know what I mean? I know I'm going 1, and I know I'm going to Chicago. Like, but for Jayden and Drake, they're basically trying to outperform, and even to an extent, for those who believe, JJ McCarthy trying to outduel each other at your pro days, because, hey, if I could show up better in front of the same scouts and general managers and NFL head coaches, they'll pick me instead of picking the other guy, right? So I think, yeah, I agree with you. The last thing I want to know, like, looking at his body type, talking about Jayden, does he look as thin in person as he does on film?
I think he put a little bit weight on, but yeah, he's still not a guy. And when I was being able to body profile these guys, so after pro day, I went onto the field, and obviously there was a bunch of people I was familiar with, spoke with, caught up with, and everything. And so I spoke briefly with Malik, Jayden, and BT. You know what I'm saying? Just, hey, what's up, bro? How y'all doing? How pro day was? XYZ. So I was right next to them. I think that he's going to have to put weight on for sure. It's not anything that's going to scare you away from drafting him. You just put like he's just in that same category with Marcus Mariota body type, with Desmond Ritter's body type, right, to where it's thin and you just hope that you could put weight on, but it's not like, oh my God, if somebody touch him, you know what I'm saying? Like he's going to crumble. Yeah, and he's a quarterback. No matter who your quarterback is, right? It's Cam Newton or Josh Allen, you still don't want them to get hit all the time. So I think if you apply that same thing, he definitely needs to get out of bounds and slide. Don't run into linebackers. Don't get power dry. Don't do that type of thing. But he'll definitely be okay for body type size. But DP, let's keep this thing going, man. I want to talk about Malik Nabers, right? There's been a lot of conversation about who? Malik Nabers and Jamar Chase. And listen, everybody knows I was on the sideline 2-3 years, watched Jamar Chase, watched Justin Jefferson. I have a big takeaway I want to talk about coming up next, man, throwing Malik Nabers into that conversation.
The sports calendar is loaded. And guys, FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on all of the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Let me repeat that, guys. Because right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 at your disposal that you can use to bet on the March Madness tournament, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. All you need to do is visit fanduel.com/locked-on and make your first bet a big win. Just visit fanduel.com/locked-on and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Malik Nabers joining the conversation, joining that illustrious club of Odell, Jarvis, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I see why they call LSU wide receiver you. You know what I mean? I see why, Keith.
I'm trying to tell people. But let's get into the conversation of Malik Nabers, man. And first of all, the first statement is that of those three guys, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas, Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers is the best football player. Jayden Daniels may go higher, but Malik Nabers is the best football player out there. What did I see, right? Having seen Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson for years at a time, right? He's cut from the same cloth, DP. The exact same cloth. His style is a little bit more towards Jamar Chase, right? I threw out the comps of, we talked about the DJ Moores and the Steve Smiths, right? But if you want to say a smaller version as far as maybe an inch shorter and 10 pounds less of Jamar Chase, I can understand that too. But watching him run routes, the start-stop ability, the ability to, I guess, tempo routes, the explosiveness, just everything he has to do to get open, he can't do that. And then the ability to work from the slot, right? Ability to work on the outside, he does all of that, DP. And the speed is real, right? The explosiveness is real. And I wanted to tweet this during the pro day, but everybody, I didn't have signal, right? It was in stadium, I didn't have signal. But yeah, it's real. You feel it. And when you watch him, and this is what I always did even when I was at LSU, right, or just scouting players, and it was a wide receiver, and, I was trying to like, hey, how do I feel about this wide receiver? I always thought about, hey, if I had a defensive back in front of him, can this guy get a defensive back problems? And vice right? If I was grading a cornerback, be like, hey, can this cornerback get the wide receiver problems? Like, does he have the athletic traits? And Malik Nabers is going to give people problems because, like I said, the explosiveness, start-stop ability, the quickness, the burst, the 40 time, I got varying times on it. I got 4.38, I got 4.44, I got 4.41. I don't think for Malik is about the 40 time. It's about the speed and acceleration, right? It's probably about the data tracking because I think he's an explosive accelerator. Now, maybe from yards, 37 to 40, right? It doesn't click over for him to run a 4.33, but you can tell that this is a guy who has real deal speed and explosiveness.
Yeah, I think when I saw when I saw his jumps, like the 42, 43
Yeah.
invert, the broad, I said, okay, he's gonna hit 4.3 something. And I was like, okay, but that, typically guys who jump that high and far, typically somewhere in the middle of the 4.3 and 4.4, right? So I was like, okay, I think maybe 4.35. When it came out, I was like, okay, I like when I first saw the number hit the timeline, I said, okay, that's kind of what I predicted. Then I saw the run, and I was like, that don't look 4.35 to me. I was like, that look more 4.38, 4.4 flat. And then he gets on Twitter at 4.28, and I'm like, Malik, that is not what you ran, brother.
Yeah.
You
I
know what I
don't
mean?
if they showed this on camera, and what happens is, and I don't know why they do it, but it used to be where we have a indoor screen, and then what would happen is LSU, the school, would put up a 40 time, right? Like their unofficial
Yeah.
time. You can kind of potentially take that and go with that, and that's if it's correct or not. But the situation was where there was not many words, right? And unless you were standing right next to an NFL scout, you get their numbers. But the problem is all the scouts have different numbers, right? Because of, just how the laser's set up. So there's really no official or unofficial time, that came from one particular source. So they get together after the workout and talk about all the different numbers they had, just to kind of congregate and, kind of compile a 40 time. But what happened was after he ran a 40, I seen Jayden run over to him, and they were really excited. And I don't know if they showed that part on camera. And then that's when I seen somebody was like, yeah, he said something about a 4.2. And I'm like, I don't think that was a 4.2 either, right? But I'm not knocking him for not running a 4.2.
No.
You talking about the run after the catch ability, all of those things are going to be still off the charts. But I left there feeling more confident that like this is a dog. And you watch his body language and his demeanor. That's why I'm saying he's cut from the same cloth. Obviously, physically, he's not built like Justin Jefferson, but my point is that when I say cut from the same cloth, I'm talking about that dog mentality. That when I step on a football field, I'm trying to dominate every single person. So that puts it in a broader conversation. And I know this is a hot topic, right? The Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Nabers situation. I just think, why can't we have both? Right? That's kind of where I'm at with this. Is I like both of them. And it just depends on your offense. And I, honestly, and this is a great situation if you are a team wanting to draft a wide receiver, is that analyze your offense, see what you need, and then go get that guy, right? And I think that's the situation, because both of those guys are extremely talented. And like I said, I walked away from Malik Nabers thoroughly impressed and was like, yeah, he deserves to be in that conversation of the LSU greats in the past.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the 40 time isn't like, okay, if the official time was a 4.41, I'm not tripping off of that, because his game is so predicated on that initial acceleration, and that's where he's the most scariest, right? Like, yeah, because I did a deep dive into him and graded him, and stuff like that this past week, and like what I remember watching and took away, I was like, okay, in press man situations, if he gets to jump on a guy, quarterback, get the ball out to him immediately, right? You know what I mean? Because his burst is so explosive that, like, because there was a rep, I think, against Kool-Aid where he speed released Kool-Aid outside, and I literally stopped. I paused. I said, man, I think he's about to burn Kool-Aid. I played it, but Kool-Aid was able to stay somewhat in phase. He didn't get beat badly. You know what I mean? But it was like, if you throw the ball over the shoulder, let him just kind of track it, he'll go get it. But he didn't pull away. And I think that's probably the main thing, is that I don't think he has that man-to-man elite breakaway speed that like the Jalen Waddles, the Tyreek Hills, those type of guys. But his burst, like post-catch, he turned that transition from receiver to runner is so innate and immediate and sudden. It's terrifying, because it's the type of guy where if your safety isn't triggering down on a slant and you don't have backers in the middle of the field or in proximity, he can turn a 5-yard slant into a 45-yard touchdown. It's just that simple. Keith, you remember when we talked about him, I said, man, I think we did this prospect spotlight, I said high end. And I think for me, like, if he hits his ceiling, he could be a OBJ type of player, right? Where it's like just explosive, yak. I think, for me, I want to see him just continue to get better man-to-man route running, but off coverage, yeah, no, like the stuttering goals, the double moves, the stop and start, like you have to be very disciplined, but also trust your athleticism with him to not bite on it.
No, and not only that, you have to trust your athleticism to not bite on it, but you have to trust your athleticism to be able to keep up, right? And I think that's the part that gets people is that I'm 12 yards off and I'm just standing there, flat footed. I don't have momentum, and I think what he forces people to do is to try to gather momentum, right? And that's when you try to start guessing, and then that's when you end up with the option routes, right? And
you better pick your feet up, Keith. You can't sit flat footed with Malik Nabers. Like you better pick your feet up.
Yeah, he and I think he would be a real problem, DP, in the slot. And I'm not talking about like, he's saying he's a slot only wide receiver, right? But I'm just, as a movement guy and having two-way options at every single time, he's a problem for a lot of defenses. And like I said, I'm excited to watch him. And like I said, I think he's a different version of the guys in the past, but he's like the guys in the past where he has the opportunity to come in early and be one of those dominant LSU wide receivers. The DP, let's keep this thing going, man, because there was a trio, right? There wasn't just one LSU Tiger. There wasn't two LSU Tigers. We're talking about 3 LSU Tigers that could potentially go in the top 20 picks. So I want to wrap this conversation up with a Brian Thomas, right? And I think we've probably had the most honest conversations about Brian Thomas, but I want to give my takeaway from what the pro day was, seeing him in person, body typing him, watching him run routes, right? Being field level, body language, demeanor. I want to talk about it all, Brian Thomas, and see where would we draft this guy.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. How is your social battery right now? Are you drained? Are you bursting with energy? Right? How are you? How do you feel? Right? Why is it at that level? Do you not have enough boundaries? Are you less social when it's cold in wintertime? Guys, it can be easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with social gatherings picking up after the winter, right? What's the right amount of socializing for you? Only you know. And how do you recharge? Maybe you thrive around people, or maybe you need some time alone. All you need to do and understand is that therapy can help you find the answers to these questions so that you can be the best version of yourself. So if you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank y'all for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., man, like, Keith, what did you see from him? Like, because he's listed at the combine, he was listed at 6'3", 210, 205, and 210, 6'3", 210. The testing, of course, off the charts for him. 4.33, 1.5 flat, 10-yard split, 38-inch vert, 10.6 in the broad. When you saw him up close and personal, Keith, what was your takeaway with Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, so the 205 is a different 205, meaning that he is don't get me wrong, he's a big player, right? Like young man. He has good size to him. Now, would I say or believe that a Keon Coleman and a Xavier Legette, and they are a little bit heavier, so that's my point, is that these are bigger body profiles than that, right? So I don't know if it's hard to explain saying that I think he has that like X wide receiver feel, but I do think he's a big wide receiver sitting at 6'3", 200 plus pounds. What did I see from the pro day? I think the pro day was consistent with the film, meaning that, and this is where, and that was probably the last thing I needed to see from Brian Thomas, was watching him up close and personal, was that Brian Thomas is good at what he does now, meaning that the vertical threat stuff. We started the pro day off, and that's why I said, right, with Jayden Daniels was like, some of it you potentially could put on the wide receivers, right, as far as the slow start. And I believe he had, one, maybe 2 drop passes, right? And it was on the end breakers, right? On the stuff that we didn't see him do a lot on film. And so I'm sitting there watching that DP, and I'm like, it was the same thing at the combine, right? It was a couple drops here and there at the combine when they were running routes on air and stuff like that. So if you draft Brian Thomas, and this is my takeaway, if I'm the general manager, I'm sitting there, I'm walking all of my scouts, and I'm saying, listen, what does our wide receiver core look like, right? And what do we want Brian Thomas to do next year and following into that year? And if I don't have the rest of the wide receiver core put in place that can do the things that Brian Thomas has to develop, I would not take him that high, just because I feel like the ask would be too high to ask him to be ready week one to do all of these things, right? As far as what he hasn't done at LSU. So if what he does at LSU currently right now is exactly what we need as an NFL team, and we have the rest of it filled out, I would take him. If not, I wouldn't take him at that time.
Does he, like, you were there when Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Terrace Marshall. Does he give you any worries that he could be a Terrace Marshall type of player, where it's like you love everything that the physical build, the athleticism, all the tools, but you don't know if he's going to actually become what you hope he becomes?
So I'm gonna make this statement first. In my opinion, Terrace Marshall is better. I thought Terrace was a better route runner. I thought Terrace Marshall understood tempo. I thought Terrace Marshall had better hands. The Terrace Marshall, and this is for everybody that potentially missed on Terrace Marshall, I don't think the miss was necessarily in the evaluation. So if you had a second round or first round grade on Terrace Marshall, I watched the guy every single day. He was good. I promise you, at 6'2", 6'3", the guy got open. He can do his thing. I think it was the more of the medicals, right? Like, how many times has there been foot injuries and things like that? So I think that Terrace Marshall was out of as a prospect, a well-rounded draft prospect. I think he was better than what Brian Thomas is right now. I never questioned Terrace Marshall's hands or ability to run different routes and things like that. I would liken Terrace Marshall to, and not from the speed component, but if you put him in the same class with AD Mitchell or something like that, right? Like a late one, round two type of guy who flaws, but you feel good about. But Brian Thomas, like I said, I think there's development that still has to be there. And we talk about all the time, DP, is that you can't necessarily trust that they're going to develop him, right? Like you can assume that he is an NFL coach and he should be able to get the most out of him, but you can't trust that, right? And so that's why I say I would analyze what is my wide receiver core and then throw him into those situations, and hopefully by year 3 or halfway through year 2, right? Like, he's a more well-rounded wide receiver as far as understanding how to run routes and things like that, beating press man, and going from there.
No, and that makes sense, because I just know, like, body type wise, I was like, they look kind of similar with TMJ and BT.
And I don't mean to cut you off, DP, but seeing both of them, Terrace was a little bit heavier too.
Yeah, he was a little bit more muscle bound.
Yeah, he was muscle bound, and he carried weight more. You know how some guys threshold is like 225, like that. They can just walk around at that. Like Terrace he could do that. Now, he didn't do it a lot, right? But he could, just because I just think he was a bigger body profile. Even talking about his lower half, he was just a little bit bigger than what Brian Thomas was.
Yeah, and I think with Brian Thomas, man, like, I'm finishing his deep dive. From what I've seen, I think a lot of what you said has been spot on, Keith. Like, he for me, tools wise, like I said, like, talking about ceiling, like, I think between him and Malik, I think his ceiling is greater, right? Like, if he hit like 6'3", 210, with his verticality, his explosiveness, his frame, he's just got to add the nuance things to his game. But again, that's not something you can bank on. So it's like, I understand why there's a lot of people keep the Heavens wide receiver 4. That's like, I'm taking him top 15. I've heard, from different people, like the Jags are, him linked to the Jags, him linked to the Bengals. I've heard different things. I'm like, okay, quarterback wise, those are some good landing spots. Like, passes for Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, that's really good for you. But I think what you said is true, Keith. What role, day one, week one, are you expecting to put him in? And I think that's what could really make or break everything. Is like, all right, are we thrusting him into wide receiver 1? Like, we're funneling our passing offense through him out the gate. Go beat the Jalen Ramseys. Go beat Marlon Humphrey. If you a Bengal, go beat Denzel Ward's out the rip. If that's what you're asking him to do, I don't like that out the gate. I'd rather put him with maybe a veteran wide receiver one or somebody that's kind of really help him come along as you pull coverage from him, give him those more advantageous matchups. Because I think he's more of a year 2, year 3 breakout type of receiver than a immediate day 1 dominant rookie.
Yeah, like the New England Patriots, the Arizona Cardinals, who else? I'm trying to think of the Carolina Panthers. Those are all teams I wouldn't care for him there. And they need wide receiver help. But like we talked about, like thrusting him to that wide receiver one role and saying, hey, go be the best guy for us, take on the number one corner, beat double coverage, beat bracket coverages, run all of these different routes. And I just wouldn't like him in that role. So yeah, man, that wrapped up LSU Pro Day. Like I said, man, it was fun. It was exciting. Malik Nabers is the best football player out of the trio. Jayden Daniels showed well, right? Started slow, finished fast. Brian Thomas, the physicals tools are all there. I would just want him in the right situation. But DP, I'll tell you one thing, man. When you turn on Locked On NFL Draft, you are in the right situation, man, for the hottest NFL draft content, the best NFL draft content. So I want to say shout out to everydayers, man. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. We know you're tapping in because we're seeing the YouTube numbers grow. We're seeing the audio side grow. Everybody's tapping in. They want to listen. I wanted to bring my perspective of the LSU Pro Day, and you know I had to do it with my guy, DP Damian Parson. Listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy. I just talked about it. Damian Parson, you can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's show, we have Keith Sanchez's latest and newest mock draft. We're going to pick through it, go through it, and talk about it on tomorrow's show. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.